Hey young friends, Dr. Bill here with you again. I'm back with another episode in our series of big names in the Bible. And once again, we're continuing to focus on the things that Jesus did. Now last week we talked about a story that's in all four of our Gospels, and that's the story of Jesus feeding the multitude. Well, today I want to focus on another story that's in all four of our Gospels. It's the story of Jesus cleansing the temple, or Jesus driving out the money changers and those who were selling sacrifices. Let me tell you how this unfolds. To better understand, I want to draw you a picture of what the temple in Jesus' day looked like. The temple was divided into several sections, and in each of those sections, only certain persons were permitted to be in certain sections. For example, in what was known as the Holy of Holies, only the high priest could enter that place, and then only once a year. Beyond that, there was a court for the priests, the other religious leaders that led worship in the temple. Then there was the court of the men, where Hebrew men could gather, and the court of the women, where Jewish women could gather to worship. The outer court was known as the court of the Gentiles, and that was the place where people who weren't Jews but who were interested in worshiping God and who wanted to explore what it meant to have faith in God, that was the place where they could come and worship. So in the design of the temple, there was provision for all kinds of people. Unfortunately, whenever there was a high holy day at the temple, the outer court where the Gentiles were supposed to be able to worship, it was turned into a market. There were money changers there, so that if you came from a foreign country, you could give your money and have it exchanged for the proper currency in order to make a gift to the temple. As well, if you wished to make a sacrifice, you could buy whatever animal you needed for whatever sacrifice you wished to make. All of this took place in the court of the Gentiles, and therefore it made it less of an available space for Gentile people to worship God. They were kind of crowded out by all of this selling and merchandising. Well, when Jesus saw this, he was very angry. And all of the Gospels tell us that Jesus went into this crowd of money changers and animal sellers, and he overturned tables. He spilled money all over the place. He loosened cages and let animals free. And he said, "Listen, you have turned my house of prayer into all people into a marketplace, and God is not happy with that." Now, one of the Gospels says that Jesus was so angry that he knitted a cord of leather thongs, made it into a whip, and drove people out. So Jesus really was very, very angry. Now, there's several lessons that we can take away from this very important story. The first is this: we can learn a lot about people by paying attention to what they get angry about. We learn what matters to them when they get angry, and they show it. This is one of the few times in the Gospels that we find that Jesus is described as being angry. And so what that tells us is that Jesus was angry that the temple wasn't being used for the purpose for which it was dedicated. There were some who said, as long as we have our space, those other people, they don't need any space. We can just use their space to do what we need to do. And Jesus said, no, that's not what it's supposed to be about. The temple is a place for all people to worship. And we don't need to set up any obstacles or barricades or make it more difficult for people who wish to worship to be able to worship. The other thing that this shows us is that God is often a disruptive presence. Now, I know that we rely on God for comfort and strength. We rely on God for courage whenever we're afraid. And indeed, that's one of the dominant messages of the Bible, that we can count on God and that God will be our comfort and our help. But sometimes God acts as a disturbing and disruptive force. He looks at the way things are and says, this is not what's supposed to be. And in order to make it into what he wishes, he sometimes has to turn over tables, make things difficult. Now that may be uncomfortable for us to think about God being a disruptive presence. But the truth is, all of us have to grow in faith. None of us are fully formed in our belief and in our walk with God. And while God may indeed comfort us, there are some times where we need God to turn over things in our lives so that we can better serve Him. So that's an image that I'd like for you to keep in mind. Jesus as a disturber. Jesus as a disruptor. Turning tables over so that people can do what God wants them to do. It's a great story, and I hope that you'll take the opportunity to read one of those versions of the story. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, this story serves as sort of the final straw where the religious leaders, seeing what he did in the temple, they set out to plot to kill and have Jesus crucified. So it's an important story from that perspective. It sets in motion a lot of the things that happened during Jesus' last week on this earth. Well, that'll do it for today. So, as always, if you have any questions, you know how to reach me. Thank you for spending a few moments with me, and I wish you well and wish you God's very best for the rest of this week. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.